Let's freaking lose it! Get out of your mind! Get out of your mind! Get out of your mind! Hey! Get out of your mind!
All right. Welcome to Take a Seat, Oregon. I'm Bubba King.
I'm Elise Yarnell Holloman.
And today, I think we're going to talk about some cards on the table.
Let's go.
You want to kick us off?
Okay. So I received feedback during the campaign that if I would just play my cards on the table. And I've thought a lot about that. And, are they calling me a liar? Are they insinuating that I am a flip-flopper? What is it? And as a nonpartisan elected official, I have been extremely cautious of who I outwardly, publicly put my name to support or push or use what I would say is unnecessary influence to be endorsing and pushing and weighing in and trying to steer a non-partisan board that isn't my own, outside of my jurisdiction in my belief system. Now, I don't think that makes me less of a leader. I think I personally am of the camp that makes me more of a leader.
Yeah.
But of course, I have my own personal opinions and skills, and I use them. And so, absolutely, I've supported people in this community and their elections and their campaigns, one of which,
thank you,
probably you. But yeah, I think it's a funny thing to say, because the reality is that the people that are saying that to me of me are very friendly with me, yet I know what they say about me. So with that, I thought it would be fun and even just good introduction to why it's you and me doing this podcast.
Yeah.
And, people questioning, like, what is the nature of their relationship and why are they close and why, so
how did we get here?
How do we get here?
How do we meet?
Yep.
And how did a few years later have a podcast?
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. And be elected. So I guess what's your take on how we got here?
Well, I think if I remember right, we met during your mutual friend introduced us when you were running for your House District seat.
Yes.
2022,
yeah.
2022. Yeah. You needed to meet farmer, and I
needed to get some ag experience.
I was like, we don't do that kind of farming, but I can give you some insight and maybe even introduce you to one or two.
Actually, Sarah was the first person I think that I met with Sarah first.
You met with Sarah first, and I came, I think I came home and I was like, who's that
this girl?
Yeah.
Why?
She's got some bad boots on.
Oh.
Well, they were fashionable, probably not farm worthy. They weren't shit kickers.
No.
And then I think that at that time I was very interested is becoming more and more interested in local politics. So I was a little fascinated with what you were doing. Still didn't fully understand it yet, but bluntly, you lost, and then
you're like, I don't want to do that.
Whatever. She's lame. No, but you were a city councilor, and you have a famous line. If you live in Newburgh and you meet Elise and she likes you, she will likely say, so what are you going to run for? And it's really annoying because she says it convincingly. And you gave me that line. And I said, well, I'd really like to run for county commissioner one day. And, that was kind of the door. Next thing you know, you were heavily involved in my campaign. We were running your campaign, my campaign, paying attention to other campaigns at the same time together. And, that day in, day out work for a couple of years really builds a friendship,
I think the first thing is that we're both really entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
And I think that just lends itself to thinking outside of the box. And I've always been one that think that elected officials should have been in some sort of industry type of work.
Yeah.
And so I think when I first met you, I remember thinking very quickly, like, you're different, and I don't look for people that are, to win in this county, you got to be different. So or that's my belief system. Second thing I think is truly knowing how to grind.
Yeah.
And I think that when people want to run,
That hustle.
often it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, that's a nice thought, pat them on the back, right? But to run for this seat, I felt very strongly and had lots of resistance that it needed to be a very specific candidate.
Sure.
Like, you need to go out and knock those doors. You need to get in front of as many people as you can. And like that hustle, you just can't teach people.
No.
So I think that was the second, and the third, is much more vulnerable. And I think is probably the thing that at the core of who we are as leaders, because we are very different in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah.
But at the core of who we are as leaders and people is the childhood trauma we both have.
Yeah.
And I don't say that in a victim mentality way, but just what childhood trauma, how that changes you, and how it either propels you into leadership, or it hinders you.
Right.
And so, I bring that up too, because I know that you had conversation at Board of Commissioners where it sounds like you shared a little bit deeper of who you are and or what makes you who you are. And so I thought this would be a good opportunity to share parallels too between your childhood experience and my childhood experience, and how we've both really chosen to lean into that and lead with that.
Something I thought a lot about on how to message and if I should or not, or because really it's nobody's business, but you have to.
We know everything is.
Yeah, but somebody's going to find out or whatever, right? But I have to work with people now in a very different way than I have in the past.
Yeah.
So, and I don't spend a lot of time talking about this. So if I stumble on words, it's, it is a little bit vulnerable. But as a kid, I didn't have a great school system. I moved around in schools a bit, and so I largely went undiagnosed, but have ADHD like most millennials. I'm a zillennial or a geriatric millennial, which my sister loves to make fun of me about. But when I was a kid, there was ADD, right? And those kids got Ritalin and they were bouncing off the walls.
Yeah.
And I didn't fit in that box, maybe for better or worse, I don't know. And then later in life, even just like a year and a half ago, I learned that I have dyslexia. And again, back when I was a kid, dyslexia was words are screwed up and letters are mixed up.
Yeah.
And 30 years later, that's much more of a spectrum, and on both of these fronts. So I went through most of my educational career, or all of it really, without knowing any of this. I didn't learn these things until I was an adult, but have given myself tools, not through therapists or occupational or anything of that, right? But given myself tools on how to function and to have a conversation and to be successful in life. And I have been, obviously. And I was trying to message to my counterparts on the board, to department heads and administration staff, and even the general public, that, a lot of times I don't look people in the eye when I'm speaking, right? I will fixate on something else, kind of either past you or just to, one side or the other that has it's not moving or it's not doing it. There's no detail to it, right? But if I'm looking at you, maybe your makeup is slightly screwed up, or or your mouth is moving, right? There's detail, right? And then that's, distracting me, right? And I'm more fixated on that than I am what you're saying. So I'm more
kind of like the watch scenario.
Yeah.
The forum.
That's a great example, right? The first forum, I kept looking at my watch, and it was distracting to, I think, people that were watching, but I have a lot of energy to put towards something that I am passionate about. And while Lindsay was talking, I was vibrating, right? I didn't know where to put my energy. And so
I think me and Sarah were in the front line.
Oh my God, I'm going to kill him. And so I took the criticism, right? Like, so if anybody noticed the other three forums, I didn't wear a watch. But I knew, and sometimes I'll shake my leg or something like that. So it's energy that has to go somewhere, right? And so I've given myself these tools, but a lot of times it comes off disrespectful, right? And so what I don't want to do is be disrespectful to marry your kid, right? Or have them have that
Yeah.
that negative connotation, right? And as far as the dyslexia goes, I look at it like, I don't see words or letters or numbers mixed up, right? If that was the case, I wouldn't. This would be way hard.
But frankly, even someone that has that, like, my God.
You can come over. Yeah, exactly. By the time you're in your 40s, you've learned how to overcome these things. Exactly. You're not 7. You're not learning how to read.
And like, are we really going to be othering people?
Exactly.
This to run?
Yeah. And so, but I see things very outside the box, like we've already said. And I see that as a superpower. And when it comes to working with people, it really lends itself to a diverse way, right? Because when we all think the same way, you get really pigeonholed, right? And like we spent a lot of time talking about that, campaign trails and so on. So, and so I'm not even just talking about partisanship or anything like that, right? But even just different ideas, different walks of life, different backgrounds, different business backgrounds. It's important to have a wide representation in business and in wherever you're working, right? And so I see this because I've had to learn these tools, and I see myself as being intelligent, right? As being very intelligent, actually. And so, and that wasn't the case when I was a kid. I thought I was dumb because I had an IEP, right? And at the time, now they think they call them 504s, but at the time I had an IEP, and I was in different classes, and I got made fun of and bullied and so on because I wasn't in the same classes, and I wasn't, and had I known these things as a kid and had given those tools as a kid, I probably would have made a lot of different choices in life. But now that I'm in my 40s and I've kind of overcome these things, really, I think that it's really become a superpower, and I've really leaned into it, and that's how I've become successful. So byproduct of this is that I misspell words, right? And so if you're going to get an email from me, it's likely going to have spelling mistakes. It used to be when I was in high school and I practiced, I had really great grammar because grammar has rules.
Yeah.
But spelling's rules are meant to be broken. And so I get screwed up on them, and it gets confusing. So if you get an email from me and it has some spelling mistakes, deal with it. And I think if that's going to make people uncomfortable, then that's unfortunate. But like, I think that what I've been able to do in my life, I'm very proud of. And if there's a parent listening that, their kids are kind of dealing with some of this, I'd love to talk with them, and if you wanted me to, or if you wanted to have a conversation with me yourself or anything like that, because the last thing I want is for a kid to think that they're dumb because of this, because the reality is they're probably highly intelligent and they just don't fit in the box. And that's really sad. And I know the public school system has come a very long way in dealing with these, but still bullying happens and so on. And it's giving those tools and having an example of somebody that's a real life person, right? You can Google people that have had dyslexia, and there's like 7 presidents and, all sorts of things. But, at the end of the day, like having a conversation with a real person goes a long ways. So, and I know I'm going to take some hate for this, haters are going to hate. And the reality is that I'm really good at this, and I'm going to show you.
I think when you boil it down, we don't have identical policy stances. Now, I do think that you and I are probably the closest in terms of a lot of people of what we believe for public policy. But I actually think what the core is the going back to who we surround ourselves with.
Right.
We are energized by a wide variety of people around us with different backgrounds and experiences. And that's because of where we've come from. Both of us were raised by conservative families, whether people want to believe it or not. And have left-leaning friends, have right-leaning friends. And, I think at the end of the day, I don't align myself with people by party. I never have. And sure, I'm a Democrat. Great. I am not a left-leaning Democrat. And
No.
if you watch any of my books, you will see that.
Well, and I think that that's really what's funny is that, I'm a NAV, obviously, spent more than enough time talking about that. But the reality is that, and I took a lot of heat for this too, is, he says he's a conservative, but, he's got the Democrats backing him. I have a paper in my bag right over there that,
Oh, no.
well, yeah, we can get into this on a different episode someday, or maybe I'll post a picture of it or something. But, there's voting records, right? And I, in a different county, had a Republican pull my voting record. And
From the Republican-based software.
Yeah. And this is, over in Eastern Oregon. So don't even come close to trying to figure who it out is the bowls and all of that. But, they pulled my voting record for me because I was curious. And they have it's 1 to 5, 1 being Republican, 5 being a Democrat. And if you're in the middle, you're varying degrees. And out there in podcast, I think you already know, but you want to take a guess out there in podcast land. I hate to break it to you, but I'm a 1. And maybe I'm not today if you go, but this was about 6 months ago. I made it clear that I'm not a Trump fan, so I didn't vote for Trump. But so maybe that's affected that at this point if you go pull it today. But
what you believe policy-wise.
But what I believe policy-wise is yeah, I mean, it's how I was raised, and a lot of it still holds true. I have a lot of very Republican friends. I still argue with them quite a bit. We agree on a lot. Over the last several years, I've become friends with a lot of Democrat friends, and I still argue with them quite a bit. And I get along with it, and I still agree with them on quite a bit, right? And so there is this, so I have a hard time putting the letter next to my name one way or the other. And
we've definitely bonded over that because I think we've both received hyper amount of criticism from both sides. And I think, conservatives don't realize the heat we take from progressives, and progressives don't realize the heat we take from conservatives. And we've just kind of said,
yeah, and that we don't pick that I don't pick a side, right? I mean, you have the D for now, but I mean, I don't see the value in a nonpartisan seat having a letter next to your name. And I think that Yamhill County really said that out loud in multiple races this time around. In local races, I think they said that pretty clearly. But I think that people have made those decisions, right? And it's not because it's not because we lied. I stand by being a NAV, and I think that I don't want to get into that today because I want these podcasts to be kind of shorter. I think it's fine to be a NAV in a nonpartisan seat. Now, if I one day want to run for the state seat or something, then I'm going to have to pick who I am and what party most likely aligns with me, or the values that I have that most represent that seat. But
I mean,
maybe, I don't know, but it depends on where Oregon is. I mean, I'm very frustrated, especially with Oregon parties.
I mean, you know who you are. It's not that you don't know who you are or what you believe or where you stand. It's that both parties don't actually represent.
Yeah, and especially in Oregon.
So, like you and me, I think it's also just very normal that when you're in the political world, you develop political friendships.
And I think, just like I said, that the way that we think lends itself to have the energy that we have, right?
Yeah, it'd be a little crazy.
Yeah, exactly. We're both high energy people, and we get energized by people. We're extroverts, and we're around in a room full of 30 people. That gives me energy, and that gives you energy. And so I think a lot of extroverts are actually like introverted extroverts, and where you and I are very much extroverts.
We're just full on extroverts.
Yeah, and that lends itself to having this weird energy, and it can make people uncomfortable.
I think annoyed would be probably a better word.
Yeah, maybe annoyed. Who knows? That depends on the forum.
Well, I think it'll be a fun ride, and I think people will get to see also a lot of the issues that we care about together, and also why we're doing this.
Yeah.
So, and those issues, are all going to be focused around livability, which livability for us really means what does someone think about when they wake up every morning, not necessarily, what are they reading on CNN or Fox News. So we're going to focus on Newburgh, Yamhill County, and the state. We are not touching national issues. We will really only go into the state, I think, as it pertains to this legislative session, what impacts will be coming locally.
Yeah, and if we have a guest or something like that, right? Yeah, but I think predominantly try to stay.
Yep. So tune in, come take a seat with us.
Hopefully we get this every week, and you can come take a seat. See you guys.
Get out of your mind! Hey, hey, hey!